Hello, everyone. I'm Jean-Claude Beyond Mystic, and welcome to this very special War Correspondent report. With me tonight is JSNIP4. You can find him, of course, Joe, at JSNIP4 Tube here on YouTube, as well as on his Patreon at patreon.com/JSNIP4. Joe, welcome back to the show. How are you?
Pretty good, but yeah, some stuff is kicking off right now. That
I hadn't
could be an
noticed.
interesting conversation.
Yes, it's going to be an interesting conversation. Thank you so much, everyone, for joining us live tonight for this special broadcast. Mr. Clif High is going to be joining us shortly. We are currently triple casting on YouTube, on Twitter, and also on Rumble. We're going to spend maybe a first 10 minutes here on YouTube also with the audience, share some of the mainstream information, and within 5 or 10 minutes or so, we're going to cut the feed here on YouTube and transfer the whole conversation here onto Rumble for the no holds barred analysis here of what just happened today and perhaps what's going to be happening here in the next couple of weeks in months as we get into the deeper analysis here of the webbot data with Mr. Clif High. So Joe, let's start here. So interestingly enough, let me see if I can go back to this slide deck here. About a year ago today, I had started this War Correspondent show based on this particular event. This was, of course, the train derailment in Ohio. And at that point, I had suggested to the audience, hey, we're actually at war and we're starting to see signs in the open that we're in a war, even though the mainstream news was obfuscating that fact from us. So things have moved on quite a bit in the last year. And I remember Lieutenant Colonel Bosey, who was on the show, who had said, before we get into too much of this war effort out into the open, he said more needed to come out in terms of the injectables and perhaps some of the adverse effect of those injectables and how people would react to all of this. And oddly enough, in the last couple of weeks, we're seeing more and more now of these adverse effects. One of them here being presented by Kate Middleton. Of course, there's a whole kerfuffle and weird series of events running around her, but they're merging these two timelines here for the mainstream viewing public on that particular front. And of course, they're talking about heart disease now in a big way. Also from Hollywood with Arnie, the Terminator himself, perhaps going to be terminated. There was a couple of jokes here on that. So we're getting closer and closer to that pivot point where this is now common knowledge, where we can get into the second phase of this war. And perhaps today, this event in Baltimore is exactly that, a beginning here of this second phase of this particular set of the war. So there was a tweet earlier by today that the Baltimore Bridge attack could be equal to Pearl Harbor, or at least Pearl Harbor 2.0. Now, when we get Clif to analyze this a little bit later on, I'm assuming he means that this is an event that could bring us into the awareness of the war, similar to how Pearl Harbor brought the United States into action here in World War II. So, Joe, while we're here on YouTube, let me first ask you your reaction to this today, your first gut reaction. What are we looking at? A false flag? Are we looking at something that's contrived? Is this perhaps retaliation to what just happened in Moscow in the theater just a couple of days ago? Your first reaction, and then I'm going to play a couple of clips from mainstream news here as we can share that with the YouTube audience. So watch your language here, but your first reaction this morning, Joe.
My reaction is it's always, not sometimes, not 9 out of 10 times, it is always the deep state. However that looks. But, the ship, we have no lights, we can't steer. Then all of a sudden the lights came on for a second, then they went back off. Right. Swerve to the right, swerve to the left. Oh, full on hit. And someone had posted some videos of one of the cameras, I guess, that was stationed facing the thing. And they're like, oh, look at these sparks at key places. The bridge is breaking.
Mm-hmm.
Huh. And I saw that and I said, okay, initial reaction could be, I'm sure power lines run across that bridge. Yep. And if it breaks and those power lines snap, they're going to, ground out on the bridge itself, potentially, However, the first one of those that's pretty much would do that, because you see like this one happen, a second later that one happened, a couple seconds later that one happened, then maybe another 1 or 2 seconds that one happened. So you got several seconds of short. The power lines, they have, it's not really called a breaker. I don't know the real term for it, but it acts as a breaker. It's on top of the power lines. And it's basically a metal thing on a hinge, and it touches, and then it's good. And when it trips, it pops out. So they have these long poles that they can go up there and pull it down and put it back in place again. But if there's a problem, it's going to trip and pop off again.
Right.
So when I see that, I'm going, that's an event that would cause it to pop.
Mm-hmm.
Then the second one happens, still didn't pop. Third one happens, still didn't pop. Fourth one, and maybe there was probably several others we didn't see because the camera's only so wide. And it's like, okay, how many of those would happen without that thing tripping?
Right.
So then it's going, okay.
There's some questions to be answered there. Right. I saw another dock worker this morning saying, "Hey, where were the tugboats? Where was the pilot boat?
Yeah.
There's a lot of weird things. Why wasn't the ship making noise with the horn there to warn of the collision?" So there's a lot of all of that. So let me play one or two clips of the mainstream news here just before we get our guest on the screen here and transfer over this conversation to Rumble. But first here, breaking on CNN, they're of course charging Donald Trump here with a DUI in Baltimore. I thought this was absolutely funny. It's like, yeah, of course, blame it all on Trump. But I digress. Okay, so let's hear Alex Jones here with General Flynn. It's about a minute clip. Let's play this here, and we'll take it from there, Joe.
So first of all, black swan events are usually, from the financial world, right? Well, this actually will impact the financial world for sure. But these are events that happen that, you just can't imagine that something like this is going to happen. There are ships that transit every port, harbor, bay, particularly the large ports like the Baltimore harbor, every single day, multiple times a day. And for something like this to happen, this complete violation of all standards and norms, they have what's called a SOP, standard operating procedures, that every single ship's captain has to go through prior to taking off from the dock itself, actually prior to getting on the ship. So everything that I see here, and the jury is going to be out for a while. This is not, I was asked earlier today, Alex, can we take the idea that this was a terrorist attack off the table? And absolutely, we cannot do that.
All right. So, Joe, I think our guest is here. So I'm going to introduce our guest. We'll come back here to some of this mainstream news coverage after that. So let me just quickly change slide decks here for a second. Present, share screen. Yes. And then we're back up here. Okay. So guys, with us tonight, of course, is the Grand Master Wu himself, Mr. Clif High. Of course, you can find his work on Twitter, and you can also find him on his Substack. Mr. High, you're looking, I dare I say, 20 years younger since the last time we saw you. How are you doing, sir?
I'm doing pretty good, guy. I've been working out.
You look absolutely amazing, Clif. Thank you so much for being on. Thank you for sending Joe and I an email this morning here talking about this specific event. I know you've been working in your shop all day trying to get through all of this data that you had run a couple of weeks ago. I know you were late looking at all of that with everything going on in your life. So a big thank you for you spending that time today. We're still triple casting right now, Clif, on YouTube and also on Twitter before we move into Rumble here. So while we're still here on YouTube, can you take a moment to explain, you put out quite a few tweets this morning, but you were suggesting that things are going to get a lot weirder here in the next couple of days and weeks. Let's have that delicate conversation here maybe for the next couple of minutes. What do you mean by that? And then we'll continue here with the live coverage and the deeper analysis here of your WebBot data on Rumble.
Okay, so to give you an indication, to give you an idea of the intensity that you're going to start feeling for April, and you'll feel it that first week. Actually, we're feeling it now. We're looking at a period of time that has, in a sidereal astrology, where you're not looking Earth-centric, but you're looking solar system-centric. But if you're looking at sidereal astrology, we're coming into a time where there's these alignments of planets that we haven't seen for over 2,000 years. Okay, so it is like all that kind of tension has built up, and it's going to come crashing out this coming, well, we're in it now for these next 19 or 20 months. Right. So the chaos that we're experiencing now is the ramp up, and we can expect it to do at some point, and I actually think that'll be on Hitler's birthday, April 20th, but at some point we'll catch a Fibonacci sequence, right? So it'll be a case of one day, and then you have an event, and then you have an event of the same magnitude the next day. But then the day after that, you have a magnitude that's double because it's basically the addition of those two previous events. And then so it goes, 3, 5, 8, etc. Right? And so it really starts ramping up. And we're going to see the shock level of it in late April. But for those people that are aware of what's going on, you'll see the precursors of all of that coming out that first week in the ramp up to the eclipse.
Okay, so we're feeling it now. You were suggesting that perhaps some people that were very sensitive were actually feeling it already in January, perhaps December of last year. I think for the most part here of this audience, we're feeling it in April. And you were suggesting that was also a setup here for perhaps June or July for the mass awakening here of the rest of the population. Now, before we go too far, we're still here on YouTube. I want you to explain where in your data, and if you looked at it today, where we find ourselves here in this emotional release language. You had originally forecasted this 81 delta. We've been incrementally increasing that over the last couple of months. Where are we today, and where do you see that moving perhaps here in the next week or so as we get closer to the April 8th eclipse? Clif.
Okay, so I'm actually expecting, all right, so right now we're in the building tension phase that will accommodate that forecast by turning into release language because of circumstances, an event, a sudden change. I expect that to occur on the day of the eclipse, but to maybe not be really visible until the next day, until that following Tuesday. I say that because they're going to have so much closed on Monday the 8th that maybe some of the effects of this will be delayed. But I'm expecting something akin to, I think it was 1987 Black Monday. In the stock market, 22% drop in a single day. I lived through that. I was working at Fisheries at that time, and I remember how many of the middle and upper level management people were ready to slit their bellies because they thought all their savings and everything had been wiped out, right? I was just a kid then, relatively to these guys who were in their 40s and 50s, so I didn't really grasp the impact on their lives. But I'm expecting something on that order of magnitude.
Okay, that seems to fall in line with Joe's latest dream also about April. We'll get into all of that. Folks, let me just bring you the link down in the live chat. If you're still watching us here on YouTube, please move over now to the Rumble conversation here so we can continue that unhindered. So I'll say farewell to